Thanks very much for being here today. On July 18th, 2017, Bill Morneau carried out a surprise attack on small businesses. He proposed tax increases that would cripple the family farm and our local businesses across the country. His proposals, had they gone ahead as he originally designed them, would have imposed a 73% tax on savings income for small businesses, would have penalized family businesses for sharing the earnings and work of their business, and would have doubled the tax on family farmers selling their farm to their kids, making it much easier and much more affordable for those farmers to sell to multinational corporations. For the following 4 months, there was a massive spontaneous backlash led by plumbers, pizza shop owners, and farmers. Throughout that time, Justin Trudeau and Bill Morneau said they would not back down under any circumstances. But eventually, their backbench MPs realized that this was going to be a major problem in the forthcoming election, which was only 2 years away. So they decided to put those changes, some of those changes, on ice and move forward with a significantly watered down version of the original proposals. But small businesses are refusing to let their guard down. Michelle Rempel, the Shadow Minister of Immigration and the member for Calgary, has now collected 45,000 signatures from entrepreneurs across the country who are signaling to this government not to try such a similar surprise attack. And I'm very thankful that she has collected these signatures, because we have no doubt that if Justin Trudeau is elected, he will bring back the same tax increases in their original devastating form once the election is behind him. And the reason we know that is because the fundamental driver for the original proposals is still there, and that is that the government is running out of other people's money, and they want to spend more. The only way to spend more is to tax more, and that is what they will do if they get the chance. So we are putting them on notice, and we are putting forward the voices of 45,000 small business owners who say that they are not letting their guard down, and they do not want, and they will not let Trudeau and Morneau try the same surprise attack on them that they launched back in July of 2017. So I'll now turn the microphone over to Ms. Rempel, whose petition it is that will be tabled.
Mr. Poilievre is absolutely right. The changes that the Liberals proposed would have been devastating to small business owners across the country. And at a time when Canada has entered into a very unpredictable and very contentious negotiation with the United States regarding NAFTA, the Prime Minister hasn't been doing his job in creating a stable investment environment in Canada. In fact, he's been doing the opposite. I'm very proud of the fact that nearly 45,000 Canadians signed this petition in opposition to the tax changes. We will be presenting it in Parliament today. For people who say that petitions don't make a difference, the fact that hundreds of thousands of people raised their voice in opposition to this devastating policy made a huge impact on helping the opposition, helping Mr. Poilievre, myself, and the leader of our party, Andrew Scheer, as well as all of our caucus colleagues in the Conservative Party, fight back against this devastating change. So it is with great pride that I will be presenting this petition today, and I want to thank Nicole Perryman, who generated the petition in Calgary, for all of her hard work in leading the charge to oppose these changes.
Make of the fact the Ethics Commissioner has cleared Bill Morneau on C-27?
Well, it's obviously surprising, but regardless of whether Minister Morneau's actions were illegal, they were definitely bad judgment. For a minister to introduce a pension bill while he owns a significant stake in a pension company is very problematic, even if, as it turns out, it's not illegal.
Vous êtes surpris? Pourquoi?
Oui, évidemment, c'est surprenant, mais même si ce n'est pas illégal pour une ministre d'introduire un projet de loi sur les pensions lorsqu'il est un propriétaire d'une entreprise de pension, c'est un mauvais jugement.
Does he say that in the report, that it was bad judgment?
I said it.
Oh, you said it. Okay.
Donc il aurait dû être sanctionné selon vous?
As I said, I think it was bad judgment for anyone to own shares in a pension company while introducing a pension bill.
The small business tax changes, obviously the Conservatives in the House have raised this for months, as you just pointed out, but are you disappointed at all that last week the budget bill, which had the changes in it, went to third reading and there was no debate, no amendments at all, including nothing from Conservative senators?
Well, listen, we've been fighting these tax changes from the very beginning. We believe that they are devastating for our small businesses, and we think it's unfortunate that the government rammed through what is left of those changes with limited debate as part of an omnibus budget. We still don't know what the consequences of these revised tax increases will be, but we will be watching very carefully to see how they play out.
Well, I'd just like to talk to you about the immigration situation in the U.S. Right now, there's been a huge outcry about the family separation policy at the Mexican-U.S. border. So, is it time now for Canada to say that the U.S. is no longer a safe place for immigrants, and should we change the Safe Third Country Agreement?
Well, certainly the first priority in humanitarian immigration should be compassion, and I think that that's something that I would like to think all Canadians of all political stripes share. Certainly our party does. The reports that are coming out of the U.S. are troubling, and it's up to the Americans to answer for their immigration policies. That said, with regard to the Safe Third Country Agreement, Canada does have a very robust quantitative evaluative framework to assess whether or not the United States remains a Safe Third Country Agreement. I strongly believe that if the government is considering lifting it, that they first need to answer to Canadians the questions that are situated within that framework. This shouldn't be something that's done on a political line or on a subjective basis. There's a reason why when the agreement was negotiated, we put those framework in there. The second component is the reality is that the global migrant crisis is I would argue, the top public policy concern in many global legislators' minds right now. People are on the move, and there's a lot of questions, difficult questions that arise from that. First of all, if the Safe Third Country Agreement was lifted in Canada, undoubtedly there would be a very large demand for asylum requests in Canada. The government would be required, Justin Trudeau should come out and say how he's planning to pay and get ahead of issues like Mayor John Tory running out of homeless shelter space, food bank usage, strains on our healthcare systems. Those are questions that the government has not dealt with to date in the Canadian context, and certainly that decision would have an impact on it. There is no budget for that at the present time or plan for integration, and that's not compassionate for asylum seekers. It's also not compassionate towards Canadian taxpayers. And the other more difficult question is, what are countries like Mexico, El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala doing to deal with the determinants of migration? Gang violence is the number one, I believe it's the top concern that's often cited during asylum claims. What are these countries doing to prevent incidences of that occurring so that there is less of an impetus for people to have to leave their homes and undertake that very unsafe journey? Those are the more difficult questions that need to be answered, and the fact is that Justin Trudeau and our government has not even touched upon that in the 2.5 years since we've started to see more incidences of this. We shouldn't just be talking about one part of the issue. There's a more holistic conversation to be had, and that's something that our party will always do in the context of compassion.
Steve, do you think the U.S. is... Sorry.
The immigration minister has talked about wanting to extend the Safe Third Country Agreement to prevent irregular asylum seekers from crossing into Canada. Do you still think that's the right approach, given these new policies, these new zero-tolerance policies that are separating thousands of children from their parents in the States?
Well, Justin Trudeau is on the record many times saying that the United States remains a Safe Third Country Agreement, a Safe Third Country, so we have to take his word for it, because it's his requirement and it's his minister that is required to have undertaken ongoing evaluation of the Safe Third Country Agreement as part of those criteria that I mentioned earlier. That's actually the job of the immigration minister. It's written right into the Safe Third Country Agreement. So when the Prime Minister of Canada asserts that the United States is a safe third country, one has to assume that it's because his government has undertaken a continuous review of those criteria and has deemed it as such. So therefore, given Justin Trudeau's assertion on this position, it makes logical sense that if we are going to have a compassionate and orderly immigration system, that the spirit of the Safe Third Country Agreement be applied. As I just said earlier, discussions around the application of the Safe Third Country Agreement should be made solely in the context of the evaluative criteria that were put in place when the agreement was signed in 2002. There was a reason that framework was put into place, and it was to ensure that decisions around our asylum claim system were done quantitative and objectively so that compassion can be maintained rather than allowing a discussion to fall into the political realm.
I'm not sure if he's actually made any pronouncements on the current situation in the United States. Maybe he has, I haven't heard them, but I'm asking you as the immigration critic, do you feel it's safe to send people back to the States, especially families, in light of what's going on?
Well, Canada maintains an arm's length and compassionate asylum claim system that is free from political interference. Those decisions are made through quantitative, objective criteria, and certainly we rely on people that are, the hardworking public servants that are making those decisions to advise legislators to that effect.
As well, albeit with their families. I'm wondering, in light of this video over the weekend, whether you know if there have been any improvements since the Public Safety Minister announced, I think in November, that they'd be looking at cutting down the number of child detainees.
Sure. I mean, when you hear things like that, we always have to put compassion at the heart of humanitarian immigration. There's a broader conversation on what compassion looks like. And as I said, I think now is the time for us to start having a more fulsome conversation about what our expectations are as a host country from countries where we're entering into major trade talks like NAFTA, where we know that there are high incidences of gang violence. Why is it that Canada and the United States see so many asylum claims from Mexican nationals? What does the Mexican government think about that? What is El Salvador doing to prevent gang violence? Those are questions that need to be answered now. And I think that Canada, the United States need to be using trade and our development agenda to ensure that those questions are answered through, incentives through both of those different objectives. I also think that we are now at a critical point, in both of our countries, in Canada and the U.S., where we need to have but certainly here in Canada, a conversation about how, if the government is saying that we are going to maintain very high levels of humanitarian immigration, many of those, as the Prime Minister has said, you don't have to take my word for it, won't have their asylum claims accepted in Canada. I actually haven't heard any speculation on the change in asylum claim acceptance rates from the Prime Minister. If that is going to be the continuing norm, then where is the plan for the budget on this? I mean, we can't continue to operate where I'm standing in front of you once a week in front of a microphone responding to provincial and municipal requests for hundreds of millions of dollars. I want compassion. I don't think anybody who looks at humanitarian immigration has to put the lives of people first. We also have to ask what the best way to do that is. And certainly these broader questions, which have not been touched upon by Justin Trudeau at all, is something that Canadians now need to hold him to account for.
So what is the best way to do that? Then if like you just said, the Prime Minister hasn't said the best way to do it. So.
Isn't that a wonderful question for him? Thank you.